left to be decided by colonial appetite or hegemonic aspirations. We have a common vision and a common plan and cannot allow any spoiler to derail them. They must be implemented. All of us are saying we want to implement the 20-point plan of President Trump, reflected in resolution of the Security Council 2803 and the New York Declaration. All of it, the plan, the 20 points, not a la carte menu. You select from it what you like and you discard the rest. No, from point 1 to point 20 and the New York Declaration. The international will cannot bow before the colonial whims of the Israeli government. Madam President, elections are to take place in Israel and Palestine in the coming weeks. The world should send an unequivocal signal that it has charted a path for Palestinian freedom, self-determination, and independent statehood that leads to two states, Palestine and Israel, living side by side in peace and security, and to a region of sovereign states that together can foster a future of shared peace, security, and prosperity. The other path leads to a very different outcome. One this region has visited time and time again. One of occupation, wars, loss, and bloodshed. How much more bloodshed from our children and our women and the vulnerable and all the Palestinians we need to put at the altar for this illegal, vicious occupation to leave us alone and to allow the international community to prevail and succeed in supporting the Palestinian people in their quest for freedom, dignity, and independence. Show our people that there is a peaceful path that leads to freedom, dignity, and security. I appeal to you, the Security Council, show our people that there is a peaceful path that leads to freedom, dignity, and security. And demonstrate to the Israeli people that this path of colonizing Palestinian land and controlling and destroying Palestinian lives is not the path that leads to security, peace, and acceptance. It is time for our region to unleash its true potential, one that can only be achieved through a free Palestine, respect for the rights and safety of all peoples, and the sovereignty of all states. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I would like to convey our thoughts and prayers to the people of Colombia following the devastating earthquake. Madam President, as we gather to discuss the escalation in Judea and Samaria, let me set the record straight. Israel condemns all violence against Israelis and Palestinians. Israel does not tolerate extremism. We confront it, but we do not ignore the reality on the ground. While Israeli extremist attacks are declining, Palestinian terrorist attacks are rising, making up the majority of attacks in Judea and Samaria. This May, there were 348 Palestinian terrorist attacks only in Judea and Samaria, 8 pipe bomb attacks, 282 stone-throwing incidents, 32 firebomb attacks, 24 arson incidents, and 2 serious car ramming attacks. That is up from 325 attacks in the month of April. According to the Israeli security forces, another 408 terrorist attacks were stopped before they could happen. How many of you have condemned these terrorist attacks against the Jews? None of these attacks were mentioned by the briefers, and none of these attacks were mentioned by many of you. This is the bias we are confronting today. This council is focusing on one side of the violence while ignoring the other. Madam President, Israel is combating extremist violence in all its forms. When it comes to Israeli extremism, we are expanding our presence on the ground in Judea and Samaria. Israel's comprehensive framework has led to increased enforcement against Jewish extremism. Those efforts have been successful. Through the first quarter of 2026, we opened 354 investigations, filed 20 indictments, and arrested 35 extremists. This has led to a decrease in extremist violence. There were 116 total incidents of Israeli extremist violence in June, down from 165 in March. Enforcement is ongoing. Last week, an Israeli was indicted for alleged killing of a Palestinian near Hebron. He will face the Israeli justice system. We condemn this violence. We prosecute these crimes. We hold perpetrators accountable. Our Prime Minister, Defense Minister, military leaders have all made clear addressing extremist violence is a priority for our government. At the same time, Israel is intensifying its efforts to prevent Palestinian terrorism. Our security forces are working every day to dismantle terror networks and prevent attacks before they reach Israeli civilians. We are finding a growing threat. Iranian weapons, funding, and training are flowing into Judea and Samaria, alongside efforts by Hamas to establish new terrorist infrastructure. Madam President, the Palestinian Authority is supposed to help us to mitigate this problem, to fight terrorism, but instead they continue to fall short of that responsibility. Even after presidential decree for Mahmoud Abbas, new terrorist, the U.S. State Department informed Congress that the PA continued pay for slay. Through 2025, they distributed about $200 million to terrorists and their families. We still see incitement to violence promoted in their communities. This doesn't stabilize the region, it fuels the violence. Madam President, this terrorism does not just threaten communities in Judea and Samaria. You know the proximity. It's being exported throughout the state of Israel. The danger is present, the violence is endless, and the victims are real. A few months ago, a Palestinian terrorist infiltrated Israel from the village of Kabatia. It's a village near Jenin in the northern Samaria. He drove from Kabatia to Bet Sha'an, an Israeli city 25 miles away. He rammed his car into Shimshon Mordechai, who was killed standing on the side of the road. Then he hit and injured a 16-year-old boy in a nearby town. The terrorist kept driving to the entrance of a kibbutz, and Harod, where he rammed into Aviv Maor. She was waiting for her parents to pick her up from the bus stop. After he rammed into her, he stabbed her until she died. Aviv was only 18. She loved nature and animals. She was passionate about horseback riding and photography. That was not it. He continued driving. He kept going. He found one more victim at the entrance to the city of Afula. When the terrorist couldn't run the man down in his car, he smashed his head with a rock. A 50-minute rampage of terror until it was neutralized. Let me ask this Council, why wasn't there a special session after that incident? What about the shootings at bus stops in Jerusalem and other events? Madam President, this reality reflects a double standard that we must address today. When speaker after speaker refers to settler violence, it is an insult to thousands of years of continuous Jewish history in the land of Israel. Jews have never been and will never be settlers in Judea and Samaria. The vast majority of residents in Judea and Samaria are law-abiding citizens. Those committing violence are a tiny fraction of the people living there. They do not represent the broader community. That is why when you actually use the term settler violence, it's a provocation. Why? Because first, it denies our connection to the land of Israel. It distracts from constant terrorist attacks against Israelis, and it collectively labels entire innocent communities for the crimes of the marginal extremist minority. When Israelis are involved, some of you uses a collective label. You call it settler violence. See how many times you used it today. But when Palestinian radicals carry out attacks, you refer only to the ones responsible. And that is the standard for all extremist violence around the world. You know, look at your countries. Take a look at the UK. A few months ago, a radical Islamist stabbed 2 Jews in Golders Green, the Jewish neighborhood in the heart of London. Did you use the attack to label nearly 4 million British Muslims as a threat? Did you describe it as evidence of Muslim violence throughout Britain? Of course not, because you understand the difference between extremist and an entire population. That is not justice, that is prejudice. Yet that is exactly the standard being applied to the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria today. 500,000 Jews. So when you say settler violence, what do you mean? That 500,000 Jews are terrorists? Support terrorism? Madam President, while Palestinian terrorists seek to drive Israelis from their homes, some voices in this council speak as though Jews have no right to live in Judea and Samaria. That is not true. We are not occupier, we are not settler. Our right to live in our land is based on our historical connection to it. It is described in the Torah, the Old Testament, and even the Quran mention the connection of Jews to the land. This past week, Jews around the world read this verse from the Torah. I will read it first in Hebrew. כי אתם עוברים את הירדן לבוא לרשת את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיכם נותן לכם וירשתם אותה וישבתם בה. And in English, you are crossing the Jordan River to inherit the land which God is giving you. You will inherit it and dwell in it. Judea and Samaria is where our story in the land of Israel began. It is where it will continue. There has been a continuous Jewish presence in this land for thousands of years. The name Jerusalem, Hebron, Bethel, they are not names invented by modern leaders or modern politicians. They are part of the DNA of the Jewish people. And this history was recognized by the international community. The League of Nations mandate for Palestine affirmed the historical connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. It called for the founding of a Jewish national home there. The international legal framework established after World War I confirmed that historical connection. That framework included Judea and Samaria. Our history is not a political slogan. It is part of our historical and international record. Madam President, I could lecture for hours about our biblical rights, our historical rights, our legal rights to Judea and Samaria. But if we want to be practical today, and if this Council is serious about bringing security and stability to the region, it must understand a simple truth. We are not going anywhere. Jewish communities will stay in Judea and Samaria, just like the Palestinian communities. Over 500,000 Jews live in 4 large cities and over 200 communities in Judea and Samaria, alongside over 2 million Palestinians. The Jewish communities are not temporary outposts. They are not obstacle to peace. They are permanent neighborhoods, cities, home, families. Today, this Council has a choice. It can either repeat rhetoric that fuels the conflict, or it can support real efforts to find a way to live in peace, in stability, and security. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.